I can see me now.
All right, you guys, we made it. Welcome back, and I should say, welcome to episode number 150 of the Jester Section Hiker podcast, your premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. And today, the spotlight is on my guest, who currently is right now in the Adirondacks. You guys, the snafu we just had. Why go through the rigmarole? Let's just bring James on. James. We can't. Wait. Okay, I told you. I forgot to unmute you. Okay, so we got to start that again. So this is the part of a podcast that nobody sees. And James is used to this, and I am used to this because James has also been podcasting since 2019. And typically when you get something rolling, there could be technical difficulties, and then you add a live component to it. I'm pretty sure James, through his computer, it's somewhere out in the Adirondack snow right now. But with everything being said, I do want to give you a proper introduction. So you guys, story time. So James began his podcast, the 46 of 46 podcast, back in 2019. And I started my show later in 2019. And somehow James and I ended up sending each other messages on Instagram, and James became my sound guy. And James is the one that told me, if you want a good recording, you should record in your car. You should record your intros and your outros in your car. And you guys, I have a van. So a lot of my show intro and outros have been in the van in the early days. So that is thanks to James. James told me what mic to get, what would work, what would not work. And you guys, this is long overdue. I'm excited to have him on. So the proper introduction, James Appleton, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Julie, for having me. That's a great sweatshirt you're wearing, man. You support so well. I appreciate that so greatly.
Mount Marcy.
We have been podcasting for a while, and it's funny. I have there's like a small circle of people who started around that same time that I just like became Instagram friends with. And it's great that there's other outdoors podcasters to just like talk about, riff with, and, hey, what are you dealing with? Hey, what are you dealing with? It's just nice to have a little community like that. And, all in the name of just like getting outside into the woods. So I appreciate it too. And I've listened to your podcast many times, and I specifically loved your episodes where you were out there on the trail and you were reporting each day. I remember listening to those.
So bad.
Oh, I remember listening to those episodes while I was painting my house. So during COVID 2020, well, like the world was shut down.
Yep.
Painting my house was my big to do. And I remember listening to, you were out during that time.
Yeah, when they told no one to go to the trail, I went to the trail.
Amen. So did I. I hiked the Northville Placid Trail during COVID 2020. But that, I remember painting my house, listening to your days on the AT. So I appreciate it greatly, and I remember it to this day.
Yeah, that was fun times. And you know what else I just thought of? We're still here. So the average podcast, the statistics are they last 7 episodes. So your average podcast that have a life on Apple Podcasts, which is the guru, the average statistic is people make it 7 shows, and the average listening time is 23 minutes. I've never met that myself. So
yeah, I hope to get there one day.
Yeah, being 150 episodes in, and James, you have 100 and I had your stats up earlier. How many you got now?
I think I'm in like 125 right now. I wish it was a lot more, but yeah, I'm around that. But congratulations to you. 150 episodes, that is a lot of podcasts. And if you just said like the statistic is, 7, congrats to you for, the longevity that you're showing here.
Yeah, it's insane. So let's get started on this. So wait a minute, I got to pull something up because I got a little twisted, when James was throwing his computer out, but I do want to show you guys something. I will actually have it set up where I can show James's website, because this is actually how I was going to introduce you. So hopefully you guys could see this. So James has a website. It's 46of46.com. And hopefully you guys can see this, because what we are getting ready to go over today is James is anything and everything the Adirondack Park. So you've got your podcast up here. You got a little blurb about who you are. James, you actually have a book, Climb the 46 Peaks with Confidence. I want to go over that. You've got a blog, you're a guide, you've got merchandise. James has a little bit of everything, you guys. So go to his website, 46of46.com. You can support his show like I've done with a hoodie. This is a hoodie of Mount Marcy. And I'm going to bring James back. So tell everybody, let's go back, because I know 2018 is when you decided to hike the 46 peaks. So how did that coincide with making a podcast? Have you always lived in the Adirondacks? For the people that listen to my show who may not know about the Adirondack Park, I want to make this as educational as possible. So let's just start there.
Yeah, sure. The Adirondacks, so it's in upstate New York. It's actually like almost a third of the entire state of New York. So obviously most people think, New York City when they think of New York, but there's the Adirondack Park, which is it's public and private land. It's over 6 million acres. So within the Adirondack Park, you could fit Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, the Smoky Mountain National Park, Glacier National Park, and the Everglades, all combined into one, are still smaller than the Adirondack Park. So it is a rugged, enormous wilderness, just filled with thousands of mountains, lakes, rivers, streams. It's rugged. It's you get back there and you're in no man's land. So that's the Adirondack Park. That's where I live. I grew up in Lake Placid, and which is right in the heart of the high peaks, which are like kind of the 46 high peaks, which is definitely, in terms of the outdoors here in the ADK, it's the main attraction. But I grew up here, and like anybody who grows up in any small town, you're a punk kid, you want to get out. So that is what happened. And when you grow up in this sort of area, the outdoors and like doing stuff in the woods, it's just part of life. It's not like, you don't think of the outdoors. That's what you do. You go outdoors, you go do things in the woods. You build BMX trails in the woods. You do fishing, all that sort of thing. So you don't really think about it as being a thing. It's just a part of life. So I left, and then I was touring in a band, and whenever we would be in like the Pacific Northwest or like in the Rocky Mountains, I would look around like, man, I love this. This is so great. And I remember it just hitting me like, of course you love it because you grew up in the mountains and it feels natural to you. And that's why you like it. And it was that moment where I was like, oh, I kind of had like that moment where it's like, you accept where you came from and you're okay with it now. And I wasn't living back here at the time. I was living closer to New York City. And then at that point, it's like, man, I really miss being able to go in the outdoors and in the summertime, go to these like awesome, rivers where we jump off the huge rocks into the huge, pools of water and like all that stuff that you did. You don't know what you got till it's gone. Pretty much that story. And then eventually my wife and I moved back up here. And in the summer of 2018, I had just decided, so becoming an Adirondack 46er is a big to do. It's a big thing here. Like it's a nice accomplishment when you do. And it's one of those things where when you meet someone who is a 46er, it's like, oh, cool. Congratulations. That's awesome. So I just was like, I want to do that. I want to accomplish that. I want to go on that adventure. So I did it in the summer of 2018. And, it's just been an absolute obsession since. Not so much whereas before it was just like you would go do things outdoors and do things in the outdoors, but then it became life, I should say, after that adventure.
You guys, people think I'm obsessed about the Appalachian Trail. James is obsessed.
I am obsessed with the ADK.
I actually feel like I'm missing out on some things in the ADK. I equate it to, I know the Smoky Mountains National Park fits inside of the Adirondacks, but I equate it to when people say, oh, I'm a 900 miler of the Smokies, or I've completed all the peaks in the Whites, or the 4,000 footers in Maine. It's like, it's a status symbol of, hikers in that area. And I know you're a hunter and you do multiple activities in the Adirondack Park. But when you decide to take on those 46 peaks, that just to accomplish that, I mean, they're not close to each other. I mean, it's vast.
Well, I honestly think the trail time, I think it's like 350 miles, which isn't that much when you think about it, but they're in the high peaks wilderness and the high peaks. They're like, they're scrunched together, but when you see footage, you see aerial footage over the high peaks, it's like, whoa, am I in Alaska? Where am I? And that's what it is. And it's these mountains, they have a magical quality to them. They capture people's absolute soul. And, I kind of think of them as, they're all kind of a character in a story, in a bigger story. And they all have their own story to tell. They all have their own kind of lesson to teach you. And I always refer to, someone who's becoming a 46er or trying to hike all 46. I always refer to it as a journey, because that's what it is. You're not the same person when you finish as when you start. You look at the mountains differently. You look at the outdoors differently. You look at adventure yourself. You experience something that changes you from the inside out. And that's, and it's like, I just see these mountains just staring at me all the time. And when you grow up here, they're there, but you don't notice them until you experience them. And then it's just like, it's weird. It's like, I see Marcy, which is on your sweatshirt there. I see that sitting in the distance, and I'm like, I'm in awe that I'm allowed to go up it and to like experience it. And I'm very obsessed with the ADK because there's just this this mysterious quality to the Adirondack Park. I always joke that when you cross the blue line, which is like the imaginary line around the park, you kind of go back in time, because we're kind of like behind the times, I feel like, here in the ADK, but that's part of its charm. That's part of the quality that it brings to people who come here, is that it slows things down to a kind of a simpler time, and where and the outdoors reign supreme. So that's it is what this place is, and it's similar to the Whites. I mean, I feel like Northeast hiking in general, Northeast
rugged
mountain and terrain.
I think the closest, of rugged,
yeah, that's the closest
Rudy,
thing you can compare it to.
Rocky and wet,
yeah,
and the sun comes out maybe every once in a while, and the hiking. It's not a sufferfest, but it is. You're going to suffer to get to those peaks.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And part of the issue that we deal with here in the Adirondacks is these trails were not cut for, they're not cut for the amount of people that are on them right now. There's a huge influx into the outdoors, nationwide. And, these trails weren't designed for that, which is, it is what it is. I think it's fantastic that people are going to the outdoors. I do think we need to up the infrastructure and we need to figure out a way to, properly maintain the trails. But yeah, the trails are, they're straight up. You hear about switchbacks, out west, they have a lot of switchbacks. They just go up the mountain. It will challenge your cardiovascular capacity 100%, but it puts you in really good shape and you get used to it. And then it's also a faster way up the mountain, as I always say. So why would I walk in a zigzag when I could walk straight up?
You could go straight up. So talk about your approach. So for somebody new like me that's intrigued by the Adirondacks and I want to complete these 46 peaks. So when you were out there doing that before you recorded for your show, what was your approach in getting these done?
Sure. So I work in the film industry, and I finished a movie in like the middle of May, and I finished a movie in the middle of June, and then I started my next movie like August 3rd or something. So I was like, okay, I have a month and a half where I'm going to be at home in the summer. And normally I'm always on the road in the summer. So this was amazing because summertime in the Adirondacks is perfection. Normal. It's sunny. It's always sunny. And it's like 70 to 75 degrees, like 75 to 80 degrees. It's a hot day. So the weather here in the summer is perfect. So I was like, okay, I'm finally home in the summer. I have the time. It's go time. Let's start hiking. So I, just started researching with other people who were a friend of mine who had hiked the high peaks, and just kind of sat down with him with my yellow pad of paper. And I put down a list of he told me all the mountains, he told me, okay, so we're going to pair these ones together. Here's the trailhead. And he helped me start that kind of journey. And then I just started plucking them off one by one. And I hiked I think I hiked like 32 of them in the month of July. I was just like out hammering away. And it was awesome. I think I did all 46 and 17 hikes, maybe 16 or 17, because you obviously do multiple ones in a day. Some of them are 20-mile days where you're hitting 5 high peaks. So like it's definitely a grind. And that's pretty much what my approach was. And then from there, I met maybe one or two people on the trail that became friends. And then I learned, there's Facebook groups and there's all this stuff, which I didn't think was a thing, right? This is where I live. This is where I grew up. It's like, it's so weird. I know this is a tourist town, but I didn't realize there's a community of people that are obsessed with this place, and none of them live here. It's just like, it's their escape. It's their getaway. We're right between Boston and New York City, where we're one day's drive from 60 million Americans and Canadians. So it's a really good wilderness in between so many spots, which is why it's such a popular place in the Northeast. Outside of the Northeast, most people have never heard of it and can't pronounce the word Adirondacks. But within the Northeast, it's a hot spot. So that's pretty much how I began hiking, and I just started plucking them off my list one by one. And I remember too, hiking with my buddy. His name is Josh. You hear about him on the podcast in this first season of the shows. I remember hiking. I don't remember what mountains we were hiking up, but I remember saying like, hey, want me to list all 46 high peaks? Because I had been like studying my list. And I just remember him being like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need you to list all 46 high peaks. But like, I just wanted to know, like, I wanted to see, like, I think I can list them all. I think I know them now. So that's kind of shows how, I don't want to say green, but like how new it was to me. Like even while I was doing, I'm still learning them. But the beautiful thing about the ADK is, those are the 46 high peaks, which are mountains over 4,000 feet elevation, even though a couple of them aren't technically. But there are hundreds of smaller mountains all over this park. Again, it's 6 million acres. All 5 of those national parks I listed before, you could combine them and it's still smaller than the ADK. So like there's mountains and the amount of trails. That's why I call this place an outdoors mecca. It's so accessible. You drive anywhere, you'll pass multiple trailheads up multiple mountains. So it's great in that regard, but you can come here and hike smaller mountains. And, hiking challenges are kind of a big thing here. And I run one called the Lake Placid Niner, which is 9 smaller mountains here in the High Peaks region, where most people only care about the high peaks. It's like these are smaller mountains that give you amazing bang for your buck, but they're smaller, they're shorter, they're less commitment. They're perfect for someone kind of starting out.
Yeah, and you have those on your show too.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my season 2 of my life. I did them in the winter. And again, it's like same thing with winter hiking. It's like, we always tell people, like, don't go right to the high peaks. Start on smaller mountains. Dial in what it's like to be out there in the dead of winter, because it is a different animal than it is during the summer. So it's just this park just has everything. And that's just hiking. Like, we're not even talking about the amount of rock climbing that happens here, the unbelievable amount of mountain bike trails, professionally built mountain biking trails all over. Paddling.
What about like
paddling
water?
is just as big
I was going to say water sports. Yeah.
Oh, paddling is just as big. And canoeing, kayaking.
What about campgrounds?
Hundreds of them.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they're state campgrounds, private campgrounds, and then within the High Peaks Wilderness and all the different wilderness zones, and forest preserves and all this stuff. There's state campsites, just like you would see on the AT or whatever. I mean, I think there's over 250. I think there's over 250 designated campsites in the High Peaks Wilderness alone. And again, that's just like, if this was, let me get in front of the camera. If this was the Adirondack Park, the High Peaks Wilderness makes up like that much. So like, if this is it, it's like that.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's a small portion, but it shows how monstrous this whole park is. So you can just have a lifetime of adventure. And that's kind of why my show is all about this place, because the adventure never ends. And for me, I work in the film industry, so I travel back to New York City for work constantly. I mean, I'm gone a lot.
Yeah.
Throughout the year. And most people, like, they drive and travel to work and they go sleep at home. I go travel for work, live there for a week, come home on the weekends. So when it comes to my recreating, I don't want to drive far. I don't want to go far at all. And thankfully I don't have to. Yeah. I kind of am like a weird snob like that. It's like, I don't want to drive 20 minutes to
James,
go climb a mountain.
I don't see you as a snob, but yeah.
I don't want to drive 20 minutes to go hike a mountain. I'm just going to pick one of the 4 or 5 that are within 5 minutes, trailheads within 5 minutes of my house, because I spend so much windshield time going to work. Whereas like other people are like, they laugh at me that I don't want to drive that far to go do something outdoors, but the flip side is I drive 6 hours to go to work. So like there's the trade-off.
Well, another thing I just remembered, James was actually, this will tell you, this is really 7 degrees of separation. James was actually working on a film shoot. There's a gentleman that does my same role that I do at my high school, at another high school that's pretty much 5 miles from me. His daughter is in the film industry. She's been in several major films, several film series. And I don't even know how we figured this out. Weren't you working with her sound on one shoot?
I did. I was on the movie Clifford, the Big Red Dog, and she was the little girl in that movie. And I think I posted a picture of the dog, which was like this, this puppet thing, gigantic thing. And I think that's where you saw the connection that,
and I was like, wait a minute. Guy's daughter.
And then I had met him because he was there.
So his name is Clark. And he and I've worked together for 15 plus years. And I'm like, wait a minute. Do you know Clark's daughter?
Oh, I put a microphone on her every day.
Yeah.
Very sweet little girl. Yeah. So that's so weird. That's just, I remember that now. I had forgotten about it, but I remember you reaching out when I posted that. She's a fantastic example of a child in Hollywood with parents who care and aren't trying to milk her for all her worth. Because
and her dad still works in education.
Sure.
I know her mom is on site with her because of the homeschooling and whatnot, but he still goes to work every day like the rest of us.
No, that's great, because you run into a lot of kids in the Hollywood business where it's like, yikes, you are in trouble in life. Your parents are even worse. And I remember too. I mean, this is so off subject, but I remember
know. Well, that's what we do. This is
right?
off anyway because we couldn't figure out how to get on here, so we're off. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I remember she would like, you're putting your microphone on her. I'm Mr. James, and the other guy is Mr. Tom or whatever. So it's like their parents were instilling a lot of respect in her, which I appreciated, and she will do just fine. She will do just fine because she has fantastic parents. But anyways, that's fun story and great movie. It actually turned out great. It's great fun little movie. Clifford, if you've got kids, check it out.
Yeah, and she's I think they're filming right now somewhere in Canada for another film. So
great.
But anyway, so you never know how you're going to reconnect to somebody, I guess was the point of that. So lead us into world. Yeah, very small world. Lead us into starting your podcast.
Sure.
And did you have this in your brain? Did you know what you were going to do? Talk about how all that got started.
Sure. So again, I climbed all of these in the summer, and I was like, man, that was awesome. And I made it a point to journal, not like journal, but just take notes, on each climb, so that a year from now I could open it up and be like, what was it like up this mountain, and have it. So that kind of started the idea that I was, taking mental notes of all of the different mountains I'm climbing. Because at that point, when you're climbing so many in such a short time, and you could understand this as a backpacker, it can blend together. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe like 4 months after I finished hiking the 46 high peaks, I was like, man, what would be awesome is, because so many people travel up here to climb X mountain for the weekend, or, X mountain range. Imagine if they could listen to a podcast, because I listen to a lot of podcasts when I drive. That's my thing. If you couldn't tell, obviously I am a podcaster. I like them. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I thought it would be great if, like, you're coming up to hike, Giant and Rocky Peak Ridge. You could listen to a podcast about hiking Giant and Rocky Peak Ridge. Wouldn't that be awesome? So I decided, okay, that would be great. There's no podcast at all about the Adirondacks. Some people have like YouTube channels, and that's like a different thing, but there is nothing in the podcast realm. And as a audio professional, I was like, well, I have microphones. I know how to edit. This would be great. And as someone who likes to tell stories, most of my podcast, especially when it started out, was all narrative storytelling style. It wasn't like conversations with people like we're having. It's like a different style of podcast, and that actually tends to be what I listen to. So my mind naturally gravitated towards, okay, you should do a podcast where you retell and narrate and bring people on the trail with you and go through your whole 46er journey, start to finish. So no matter what mountain they're driving up, from New York City to climb this weekend, there's an episode to listen to that high peak. So that's what I did.
He's not being as detailed as these episodes are. I mean, when he's walking, you could hear like splash of water, like if you drop something, like if you get in your pack, like all the sound is literally like you're hiking up that mountain, which is why I loved it so much. I was like, this guy's got something here.
Yeah, I appreciated that. And that's what I wanted to build. I wanted to be, if you're in your car commuting to work, I want you to feel like you're actually in the woods on the trail with me. And it's emerged over time, and then I started incorporating live audio from the trail and very documentary style, and that's what I like to listen to. So that's what I put together, and I just thought this would be great. So I wrote all 17 episodes. Because I had to, so I'm not just like freeballing on the microphone. I'm like, I have it scripted out so that I didn't miss anything. And I told the story like a narrator would do. And that's what I wanted to do. And, I wrote every episode, and then I recorded.
That is a lot.
Yeah. It
was episodes and then articulating the episodes and then editing the episodes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the first episode, it was great too by doing it this way too, because as a podcaster, you hate your first few episodes, and most of the time, the longer you do the podcast, the more earlier episodes you start to hate. It's like, a year in, you hate your first 5 episodes. 2 years in, actually, I hate my first 10 episodes. And, so
I think
it was good.
I always say it took me 50 episodes to really feel like, okay,
you find your flow.
Yeah, find my flow. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was good that I did it this way, because I wrote all of them and then I recorded all of them. and I edited all of them before I left, before I released anything. And then I was able to, and then I redid the first 2 episodes, which was really helpful because by the end, it's like, oh, I kind of found my flow. And, now I listen to all of them and I'm like, oh, I wish I could have done this better or that better or whatever. But that's, anyone who does anything creative is always going to kind of nitpick their stuff. Yeah. But I released them all Netflix style, just one day, boom. Hey, everyone, on this like Facebook, Facebook page that has like 20,000 Adirondack hikers. Like, hey, everyone, here's a podcast series I just put out. Enjoy. Here's a whole 46er journey, start to finish, in podcast form. And obviously people gravitate towards that. And it became, it was well received, thankfully. And I had no intentions of continuing the podcast. It was just like this fun activity I could just do and have it out there. I just wanted it to exist. I just wanted it to be out there because the mountains aren't going to change. The trails aren't really going to change. The stories now or 10 years from now will still be relevant because it's kind of the same thing. And then, I don't know, maybe like a couple months went by and then someone else, I just kept getting messages asking if I was going to put out more episodes and like more episodes. And I was like, okay, I guess I could keep doing it. I'm always out in the woods and hiking and stuff. And I could keep doing it. So then I did another season, which was what I was talking about before, the Lake Placid Niner, because it was the winter at that time. So I was like, okay, I could do a winter series. And I did that. And then, so the first year was very kind of seasonal. And then eventually I started doing like like a weekly type of thing. But at first it was very Netflix style, just like, boom, here's a season. I love that. Boom, here's a season. Yeah, it's a lot of work. But it's nice though, because you give people the opportunity to binge, which is kind of what I was going for. But
I've always said I still have that goal to do that series or binge style. And I tried to do that in 2020, but I was putting out pretty much, I was recording for like 4 or 5 days and then I would put it out in like a day. So it would be like live on the trail, but not really.
Sure.
I still have those aspirations to do something like that because I love hearing footsteps and all that stuff, like from the trail.
Sure.
And having somebody, Go ahead.
It paints a picture. It just like lets you feel like you're out there. And, I get a lot of people complimenting me on that. And I just think like, there's no other way to do it. You have to, this is an audio platform, but I'm trying to paint you a picture. So I have to do it with your ears. And, it really helps kind of create the vibe. And, it's nice too, because by doing these episodes, I've really kind of found my voice in terms of writing. And that has become a big part of what I do with both this platform and then other endeavors outside of podcasting. It was because, I'm a sound guy, right? So it's like, I don't really need to write anything. Why would I need to do that? I graduated college, a million years ago. So it's like, I don't write anymore. Whereas now I have a reason to, and it's morphed and developed into more and more things now. So it was kind of like a perfect reason to kind of hone those skills and turn it into a strength, I guess, which I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to do. And I just made a podcast that I would want to listen to. That's it. I didn't know if other people would be into it because most podcasts, again, are obviously conversational. So this was like kind of a weird, kind of different type of vibe, but I would have listened to it. So that's why I did it the way I did it,
Well, listen, somehow I don't even know how I found it, but I've been a podcast junkie for a long time, since 2015, 2016, when they first came out. So anything with trails, I'm sure I looked it up. I don't know how I found it in my feed, but so you guys, I just want to say, go over, listen to James, the 46 of 46, hit up his website. You also guide, so people could hit you up for information. You can buy the ebook on how to accomplish hiking the 46 peaks. We are, believe it or not, about 34 minutes into this episode, and I want to spend some time on 3 recent episodes that you just had, because it is near and dear to my soul. So you just released, right around Christmas time, a backpacking 101. And to me, it's all about hiker safety. And it was right around the time I think somebody had passed away in New Hampshire, going up on Franconia Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
And you decided to put these 3 particular episodes out, and I absolutely loved it. So I would like to speak about that, because the listeners of this show are very used to hearing about hiker safety, and the
Mm-hmm.
more we can get it out there, the
Sure.
better. So please speak about that and why you decided to do that.
Yeah, sure. So it's Winter Hiking 101
I'm sorry. I
three-part
don't know why I
series.
said backpacking.
It's all
My
right. I knew what you
apologies.
meant. I knew what you meant. We've already talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Winter hike. So it's all about winter hiking, right? So as I mentioned earlier in the episode, hiking and winter hiking, different sports. Just like, you know, basketball is a sport. It's got a ball you play with your hands. Football is a sport. It's a ball you play with your hands, but they're different. They're not the same. There's similarities, but they're not the same. And that is how I approach, and I believe winter hiking is versus, let's just call it summer hiking. For obviously you hike in the fall and stuff too in the spring, but we'll just call it that. And so we get a lot of rescues. There's a lot of DEC and, ranger rescues here all year long because this place is so popular, and, people coming out and kind of they're overestimating their skill set. And that's kind of that's happening everywhere in the outdoors and nationwide. But in December, this girl went out in the whites and she froze to death, just not prepared at all. It's tragic. She was like 19. And then a week later, there was a kid here on Algonquin, which is the second tallest mountain, who was just minutes away from dying from hypothermia. Like desperately, they were trying to keep him awake on the phone before he got rescued. When he was in waist deep snow, in not hiking clothes, on top of the second tallest mountain in the state, and by himself. It was absolutely tragic, and it was an absolute miracle that they got to him in time and rescued him. And so I was like, man, there's so many people going out in the winter. And I thought to myself, I was like, okay, well, what can I do with my podcast to help kind of remedy this? So I thought, okay, let's do a Winter Hiking 101, episode, because I'm always out there and I've learned from people before me, and I teach people who I've been out there, longer than they have. And that's, like anything, that's how you learn from people better than you and who have done it before. And that's what I did. So I started writing, because of course, like I could have just riffed on the microphone and just talked about stuff, but this was such an important subject. I wanted to nail it and get everything down. So I started writing, and I was wanting to start at the base. I wanted to start at the beginning, and just so that at the end of listening to this episode, you are very further ahead in your education on what to expect, what you need to have with you, what to know when you're going out in the dead of winter in snow in the mountains. And then it was like, wow, this cannot be one episode. So basically it quickly turned into a 3-part series. And so the first episode is all about, I start at the absolute base, which is the clothes. And I start at the bottom, the base layers, mid layers, shells, puffy coats, backpack, what to have in your back. I hit everything as detailed as possible. I give examples of what each things are, different options you can choose. Like, I just wanted it to be the most information you could ever think about in the shortest amount of time, all about this subject. So the first episode is all about like kind of what's on your body. In that episode, I also talk about snowshoes and micro spikes and that sort of thing. Then the second episode is what goes in your backpack. And then also the hiking experience. So I touch on what all of this stuff I've been talking about looks like. Because if you've never gone hiking in the winter and you hear me talking about layering and figuring out your layering and layers on, layers off. Oh, now I got to throw this layer on. Oh, I'm getting a little warm. I'm going to take it off, because the whole point of, the whole thing with winter hiking is you don't want to sweat. Once you start sweating, that's bad. You're wet. And that's when hypothermia starts to kick in. Well, it's not necessarily when it starts, but you're in a lot worse shape if you start getting really wet and sweaty. And then the third episode was all emergency stuff. So hypothermia, avalanche, frostbite, and just, I just touched on, the unexpected overnight too, like how to survive the night if you're out there. So I just wanted it to be something where people say, wow, there's so much information in these episodes, and I am so much more knowledgeable now, and I have a better foundation of understanding of what winter hiking is. And I'm not to be cocky or anything like that, but I am just very proud of what I put out, and I'm very
No, it's very
confident
good. You should
in
feel
that.
good about it.
Thank you. I
And
actually do. I genuinely do. I
I
feel
do have a couple
confident.
questions.
Sure.
One is more opinion based, and
Mm-hmm.
one is more action based. So, in your opinion, or in your regard, in my regard, when I read things of people going out, oh, I'm only going to be out for like 2-3 miles. Oh, I'm only
Mm-hmm.
going to be out for, an hour or 2 hours. Especially right now where you are in the Adirondacks, the White
Mm-hmm.
Mountains. I mean, the other day it was like -100 or something on top of
Yeah.
Mount Washington. It was insane. In Maine, how do we get the word out about safety? How do we get
Mm-hmm.
the word? How do we make it cool? I don't know if it's, how do we get other creators talking about hiker safety? Because when I started the hiker safety account on Instagram, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, how do we get more information out there about this? Because it's serious.
Yeah, it's absolutely serious. And that's why, it's like, I thought to myself, I said, if I put these episodes out, that actually genuinely could save a human being's life. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I felt it was and props to you for making the hiker safety page. I felt as an outdoors podcaster, it was my duty to humans to put something out that can genuinely, like, literally save a person's life, because maybe they wouldn't have known to have all this stuff with them,
Yeah.
or they would have thought, oh, winter hiking, no problem, sure. When in the series I talk about, I say, like, it's not for everybody. Winter hiking is not for everyone. It is only for people who will get the equipment they need, they will take it seriously, and they will do what needs to be done. No feelings attached, no emotions, nothing. Like, if you're not going to do what you need and have what you need,
Yeah.
just wait until the summer where you can go out in a t-shirt and a backpack. Just wait. Winter hiking is a different beast, and it will hurt you real fast if you disrespect the mountains, you disrespect outside. So safety is very important. And I just feel, in terms of making it, more widespread, I honestly don't think there's anything else we can do other than literally what we're doing right now, which is we're taking what we're doing and we're trying to do some good with it, on top of entertain people, on top of,
Yeah.
give someone a nice outlet for the outdoors when they're sitting in their car driving or whatever. Like, you have a duty to just your fellow man and woman around you to help if you can. And I
Yeah.
think this is a way to do it. So I do think that if all these different podcasts started did a single episode just about some safety stuff, well, great. Now your listenership has some more nuggets of information. You could bring people on to talk about it. I just think the more you discuss it, the more you talk about it, the more it will be. Now, there is also a caveat to that, which is, the concept of leave no trace shaming and all this stuff, like, that doesn't work. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help
No.
anybody.
Well,
It
that's what
just
I'm
makes it
saying. Like, I don't
worse.
want to shame people into,
Yeah.
because I mean, people argue. I've had people argue with me about, carrying a spot device versus some other device. I'm like, it's
Mm-hmm.
not about that. Just carry a device. Believe me.
Sure.
And 10 times out of 10, we don't want it to happen to you. But
Yeah.
what if you come upon somebody that's hurt,
Mm-hmm.
or, something happens to somebody else that you're hiking with? At least have the minimal tools, that can help
Yeah.
you out there.
Well, no, there's definitely, there's a level of being responsible, just like anything. You've heard it since you were a kid, be responsible in the outdoors. Do you want to set yourself up for success? Nobody ever plans to break their ankle when they're
Yeah.
going hiking. Nobody ever plans to get caught out there overnight, but it happens. And you have zero control over what Mother Nature is going to do today. You have zero control when you're in the mountains, you're deep in the woods, like, storms come in, things change. Oh, look at that little root. You have no control over what's going to happen. So is it better to just prepare even for like the slightest things, oh yeah, it's going to be extra weight on your back, but maybe get a little stronger so it's not that big of a deal to you. I know there's what is it, graham weenies, where like every ounce counts. Oh, I mean, sometimes you gotta prepare for certain elements. And I always joke to people, like, I'm the type of person you want to hike with if something goes wrong, because I'm a textbook overpacker. I see these people with like summer packs, and their summer day packs weigh like 8 pounds. And I'm like, my summer pack still weighs 30 pounds. I don't even have snowshoes on it. Like, what am I bringing that you guys aren't bringing? But again, I'm just by nature a textbook overpacker. So maybe it's good to be in the mountains with me if something does go wrong, because we'll survive the night. And it's like, you don't need you don't need to bring a lot to just have like a few emergency situations covered just in case. Because again, it happens. Yeah. It happens. Last year, 2022 in the summer, I sprained my ankle like every week for like 5 weeks in a row. So the first week I was walking on a lawn, and in a lawn, sometimes there's like a dip in the ground, but when the grass is cut, it's all the same length. So you don't know. So I was jogging across this little 50-foot piece of grass to get to another road, stepped in it and twisted and just like turned my ankle. It was all giant and black and blue. And then I was at work, so I just kind of finished the day limping. It was super swollen the next day, and I just kind of played hurt and kept going. And then literally every week for the next 5 weeks, I re-twisted it on something so stupid. Literally, I kid you not, Julie, there was one of the days that I did it again, and I would text my wife and I would text the guys I'm working with. I just did it again. I just rolled the ankle again. For like a month.
You sound like you got my luck, because that'll happen to me too. It was atrocious stuff over and over.
I kept joking. I was like, this is not a safe world we live in. We're here to roll our ankle out nonstop. But because it was literally every week in a row for like 5 or 6 weeks. There was one week, I kid you not, I'm walking to my van in a parking lot. It was late at night. No, there was no streetlights, just like a parking lot. And when you look around, there's nothing on the ground except one pine cone, and it's like a longer pine cone. And of course, I stepped right on the pine cone and I rolled in my ankle again. I was like, oh no, I did it again. And I'm like limping, and then it was swollen again. It's like, and that's my example of like, you don't know when that little root in the woods is going to twist your ankle. You don't know when some little stupid thing is going, you're going to step over this log out there, and there's just this little nub on the tree, and you're going to slice your leg wide open. You just don't know. So it's important to, take safety seriously, and,
be prepared.
Be prepared the best you can be, but also be prepared for things that hopefully will never happen. There's the old saying, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. And I don't think it's going to necessarily ever be thought of as, there's a lot of people who don't know to even think about it. I think that's really what it comes down to. A lot of people don't know, like what I just said about you could slice this open or you could roll your ankle. Like, it's not on people's radar. Their radar is summits, cool views, pictures for social media. Look how outdoorsy I am. That's kind of what's on most people's radar. So I do think
I fell 2 summers ago in Pennsylvania, and there is no trail. It's just like all rocks. And I fell at a rock. It just hit me right in the middle of my knee. It started bleeding. I still had 2 miles to go to get to a road. I used a bandana. I ripped up things in my pack. It never did stop bleeding. I ended up having to get like 2 stitches. So I actually ended up adding something to my pack, which is like that little stop bleed powder.
Sure.
Just to have like it's a little salt pack. That's what it looks like, a little salt pack. And I'm like, okay, I'm never having that again. Obviously I have a bleeding problem with my knees if I fall. So
sure.
That little thing is not going to be that heavy for me. So
no, a little bit goes a long way too when it comes to prevention. What's the saying? Like, what is it? An ounce of
something is I know what you're saying, but I can't think of it right now.
An ounce of.
Somebody put it in the chat. What is it? What are we trying to think of? Listen, James, I got a question for you from somebody in the chat.
An ounce of cure is worth a pound of prevention.
What is it?
Something. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Sorry.
There you go. There you go. Like right here. You heard it.
But it's true, though. It's true. Yes.
So we've got a question for you from Kendra. I'm going to pull it up on the screen here. So if anybody has another question, put it in the chat. I'm going to have James answer a couple questions, and then we will wrap up, believe it or not, even despite the delay. This has been an amazing episode. So Kendra wants to know, thanks for bringing this combo. Oh, wait, wrong question. Kendra says, what is the most underrated peak? Best non-high peak hike?
All right, most underrated high peak and the best non-high peak hike. The best non-high peak hike, I would say, is Hurricane Mountain. It's always the mountain that like if someone's coming up to climb and they want to hike one mountain, it's like a medium-sized mountain. It has every type of terrain that you'll experience in the ADK. It's a medium-sized mountain. So I'd say it's like a half day type of hike. It has a fire tower on the top, a huge rocky summit. It's got a little of everything, and in most people's cardiovascular capacity can handle it. It might be a challenge, but that's okay. We should face challenges, and we should overcome them. So it's a great mountain to climb, Hurricane Mountain. And the other one is the most underrated high peak. That's a great question. I've actually never been asked that question before.
Ooh, good one, Kendra.
Yes,
excellent.
Kendra, good job. And also thank you for listening to my podcast. I saw you said you listened to both.
Yes, sorry. I took her question off there. That. She says she enjoys both of our shows and I appreciate love all things ADK.
The most underrated high peak. I would say that Panther is the most underrated high peak in the Santanoni range, and I'll tell you why. The Santanoni range gets crapped on a lot because it is one of the most. I mean, it is rugged, it is tough, it is hard, and but when you get up to Panther, it's like a mini version of Algonquin, which is one of the people's favorites mountains. It's just like a miniature version of that. Like great summit, great views. The climb is fine. I would say Panther, and then my second runner-up is not a popular choice, but I would say it's Allen Mountain. The summit of Allen, if you go past where the sign is and just keep going a little bit, you come to an absolute bonkers lookout, and it's a great place to eat lunch. You see, so Julie, Allen Mountain, it gets frowned upon by a lot of high peaks hikers.
Well, that's the one I want to do. So I buy the books and it says, oh, everybody goes here, but I want to see the places that are like, okay, you really want to go here. And that's what that mountain sounds like to me.
Well, the reason that it gets, people hate on it is because, I mean, the summit is still fantastic. It's still got unbelievably great views on the summit, but it's 8 miles from the trailhead to the base of the mountain before you start climbing up. So there's a long approach.
That's okay.
Which a lot of Adirondack mountains have long approaches, but Allen has a gigantic approach. So I'll give it that. But it's a nice hike. Like, it's very different than the rest. And you being a backpacker, like, you're used to these long flat trails, whereas a lot of times in the ADK, you just like long approach and then boom, straight up, which is what Allen is. But I would say Allen. I don't have the hate for Allen, although a lot of times by the end of Allen, like when you get off the mountain, you're pretty much ready to be done, but you still have an 8-mile trip back. But it's a nice 8 miles. And of anywhere in the high peaks, you're more likely to see a black bear on Allen, in the Vanderwacker Wild Forest.
Ooh, okay.
So it's a good choice. Allen Mountain.
And Ina, I just want to say this. Hey, Ina, she's in the chat, and she says we need more basic wilderness first aid. So
sure,
we're doing our best, Ina. James is doing his best. And before we close out, I talked to Paul about this when he came on my show earlier, and I asked him about I came up with this thing. I said we should do a podcast-a-thon where we go live. So maybe we take that group of us that started around 2019, like me, you, Paul, maybe Lori from Hike, and anybody else that you think, and we address particular topics. And one of them could be hiker safety, basic first aid wilderness. You could do like a Adirondack 101.
Be a good round table discussion. Yeah. I think that would be fun. And that would be really fun, because the good thing about that too is you're also getting very different perspectives from people who are in very different parts of the country, which I think is really neat.
We need somebody on the West Coast. Who do you know? Yes. Or we need somebody from the middle of the country or West Coast. We got to find somebody.
You got Paul, who's in Ohio, and I know you're from Ohio. OH.
IO, baby.
And then I don't know anybody in the West Coast. Unfortunately, it's weird. I'm sure there's thousands of outdoors podcasts out there, but I don't know of any of them. So I'm not sure. But it would be really neat because you get different perspectives on like, what does someone deal with in Washington? What does someone deal with in Colorado? What does someone deal with in who's like exploring Utah? Like there's all different things in Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, New York, like the whites. There's all sorts of different perspectives from people who travel and, you know, adventure all over the place. So that would be a fun round table. I'd count me in as the
so we were planning
guy.
on doing that this year. And Paul was thinking maybe toward the end of March, beginning of April, when everybody's like itching. You know, everybody's got hiking on their mind and getting out and what are they going to do for their hikes. So I'm going to catch up with you guys. We'll have some behind the scenes chats on how we want to put this together. We can go live and have a roundtable discussion or whatever we want to put together. And I think it would be a lot of fun and informative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to just talk. I mean, it's talking shop and talking shop with a desire to spread some information that will be beneficial for anyone who's venturing into the great outdoors.
Yeah. And you guys are hunters and I know into kayaking and all kinds of stuff. So we could really run the game. I want to do it. So are you saying yes here?
Yes, I'm in. I'm in. I'm in.
Awesome. Well, James, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Don't go anywhere. I want to chat with you once this is over, but I'm going to flip the screen over. So you guys, we really appreciate it. Oh my goodness. Technical difficulties getting on here earlier today. For those of you that showed up for the live, I really appreciate it. For those of you that are listening to the audio version at this point, we really appreciate you coming. James appreciates it. And that's all I have for now. Everybody have a wonderful evening. As always, thanks for listening. Be safe out there and happy section hiking.